Thank you very much indeed. Right, good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to the Corporate Parenting Board meeting. 16th of September. It is the 16th of September, isn't it? I'm Councillor Kate Weller, chairing this meeting. It takes so much time. There are so many of us here. It takes so much time when we introduce ourselves at the start. So if you'll forgive me, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to ask you, as you're called to speak, to introduce yourself and say what your role is. And if at the first time that you speak, if you could introduce yourselves. Very soon we'll all be face to face and we'll get to know each other properly. But in the meantime, do please say who you are, because we won't all recognise each other's voices. So other than that, I'm not going to do anything more in the way of introductions. Matt, apologies. What apologies do we have?
Thank you, Councillor Weller. I'm Matthew Chislett, Service Manager for Corporate Parenting, Permanent and Care Leavers. Just in terms of apologies, in no particular order, we have Liz Plasto from the CCG, Councillor James Somper, David Webb from the Service Manager for the Yacht Team, Louise Drury as Head of Service for Children in Care and Care Leavers, Councillor Lugg, although she may be able to join a little bit later today, is just having a few internet connection issues. And then we have Stuart Dipple, who's just given his apologies, and Karen Elliott, who's the Head of Quality Assurance for Dorset Council.
Lovely, thank you very much. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Nobody's shouting out, so that looks as though that's okay. We don't have any public participation, do we, Matt?
Not today. Oh, sorry, I should ask Democratic Services, sorry.
Hi, Chairman. It's Megan from Democratic Services. There's no public participation to report today.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. So we move on to Teresa. Would you like to do an introduction and a bit of scene setting for today's meeting?
Thank you, Councillor Weller. Thank you, Chair. Teresa Levy, Executive Director for Children's Services, and it's that special job that I have, which is the job that we all have in this room today, which is to take that collective responsibility to ensure, as every good parent, that our children have the very best possible lives they can have. And the agenda today will take us through areas of particular attention we're giving around those life outcomes. We know that by the pure nature of being a child in care, your life outcomes are likely to suffer. It's a truism, sadly. The evidence base has been very strong for many, many decades now. So we want to make sure that we work increasingly against that, that challenge. And yet we know that, and you'll see in so many of the reports today, some of the areas where we're continuing to strive to make sure that all of those children thrive are around their emotional well-being, their physical health, their educational outcomes, with the complete strategy that continues to be in place of keeping our children as close as possible, firstly to their own families, secondly within their communities, and where they need to be in care, close to us and close to the relationships with their workers. And we know that we've seen some great improvements in the last few months and 18 months too, around the stability of their workforce, being able to build really good relationships with them. Just left a call with a member of our legal groupings who work with us and has worked with us for many times, many years, and describing that a real sense of huge improvement and progress in our social work practice in the courts when we're looking at doing that difficult decision about removing children. And that's so important because it means that people have been thinking very carefully about those decisions. So that was a very generous and very good to hear. We know that where we want to have our children is in foster care in Dorset, and lots of early good healthy shoots showing there in terms of a nice steady response to the campaign to see applications going up. The numbers, the core numbers of foster carers will go down before they go up, as we said, because some people will be leaving who haven't been offering placements for quite a long time. but we're seeing a nice steady trickle through, and that's what we want. Actually, we don't want a big gush because that'll knock us over and we won't respond to people meaningfully. A nice, really steady trickle is what we need. So that's really good to see. Really looking forward to the residential provision coming online towards the end of this term. It's desperately needed, and we know that it's going to be providing really good provision for our children, in increasing our offer from the Cherries and Hayswood and other places too. So lots to feel very positive about, but you'll see from today's agenda, huge amount of work going on, for our children in care and our care leavers, and you know, all credit to the teams for the work they're doing. The ambition for us is to be the best corporate parent in the country, so we've got work to do and we're all up for it.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. And I think we all share that sentiment, Teresa. It's a challenging ambition, but it's good to be challenged in that way. So that's great. Thank you. Item 5, Sarah Jane, can I ask you to introduce item 5?
Of course, Chair. And can I just check that that's the permanent strategy?
Yes.
Just because everything's frozen for me. Perfect. Okay, that's great. So I'm not going to steal any of Matt's thunder, really, and Matt's going to give you an overview of our permanent strategy. For our children in care, permanence can mean a number of things, and we would always hope for all of our children they keep those lifelong links with important people, and it might be permanence is back with family members, let's hope. But if that can't be achievable, then obviously we would look for extended family members, or where it's right and proper adoption. And what Matt's going to talk you through is how we're doing our best social work practice to get timely permanence for our children. It's really important that we do that well, and we do that within their time frame. So Matt, I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to present this today, to be honest with you, because as Teresa had said, that the ambition for us to be the best corporate parents that we absolutely can and get the absolute best for our children in care comes down to how we achieve permanence for our young people. I absolutely believe, and that's why in the policy we've spoken at great length about relationships and how we work as an organization, not only with our children, but with their families, so that we can keep families together where it's safe to do so, and where it isn't, we've done the right work and assessments and we keep them involved, because our children may be in our care, but we'll continue to have relationships with their local communities, with the extended family members. And it's how we absolutely work our way through building those relationships, making sure that we're looking at all the permanence options for our children as detailed in the report, and absolutely doing that in parallel with multiple options if needed, to absolutely make sure that there's no drift or delay in achieving permanence for our children. Now, the reason that's important is we know that if we can have a stable placement, if we have the right orders in place where it's needed, it really has a positive impact on achieving permanence and the emotional well-being for our children, as we'll hear in reports as we work through today. I absolutely believe that Dorset is the best place for our children to grow up and live and to thrive, and I'm hoping that you feel the same way in terms of the a strategy that has been pulled together. I didn't want to talk through in too much detail. Really, what I wanted to do was open up to you to see if there was any questions or comments that I could answer. Now, I hope I'm coming across in the right way, because I really am chuffed to be presenting this today.
Thanks very much, Matt. Yes, you rightly chuffed, because it's a very comprehensive piece of work. I've got no requests to speak in the chat bar yet. Now I've got lots. I thought I would.
Brilliant.
Richard, Councillor Biggs, then Councillor Holloway, and then Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. Richard Biggs, Vice Chair and Member for Panbury Ward, Dorchester. Just, I suppose, for the wider committee, I suppose our challenge here, these are all fine words. We all aspire to that. How are we going to measure that? Now, I think I know the answer is, well, we look at the data set. Is that sufficient to give us enough information? Is that detailed enough? Is that, does that need to be a higher prominence rather than last thing on the agenda, where we're all sort of getting a bit tired? Because if this is the most important thing, maybe the data set should be at the top. I don't know. Just put that into the mix, really. I don't have a firm view, but be interested to know if that's the only method or there's other ways that we can measure the quality of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. That's an interesting question. I'm going to go to Councillor Holloway, and then we'll put some answers in together afterwards. Okay, Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Ryan Holloway, ward member for Wareham and member of the corporate board. Matthew, just one very brief question. Yeah, I did enjoy reading through this report, so thank you for presenting it to the board. Just one thing where it says that recommendation for review for 3 years. Is there any possibility that we should be reviewing it, maybe sort of like if we implement this strategy, should we review it maybe sort of more like a year, 12 months down the line to make sure that we are meeting those targets? Because I'm just thinking it's good to have these long-term strategies, but 3 years is still a long way, and we're living in a world at the moment, particularly where things are sort of still changing at a rapid pace. So sure. That's just the only sort of little concern I had, was maybe we just possibly review how the progress is maybe a year down the line, because I think just to make sure that we can meet these targets and obviously meet that the strategy is working.
Sure.
We'll go to Councillor Jones and Matt, then I'll give you an opportunity to respond. Okay. Stella.
Stella Jones, Dorchester East councillor. I've got 2 questions. First of all, the special guardianship. It says that the council has no responsibility when this happens. Do we not follow up these youngsters at all, or do we just hope it works because they're not actually adopted at this stage? And my second question is the contact supporting the parents to, well, the youngsters to meet with parents and relatives. How does this work, and how do you do it? I'm connected to the Dorchester Child Contact Centre, and I know how difficult it is to get parents to agree to meet each other and agree to let the children meet other people. So I wondered if you have that worked out, how to do that. You obviously have.
Thanks very much, Stella. Yes, my feeling, I think it's a great report, but I would like to know how we're going to achieve it, how we're going to measure how we're achieving it. And I think Councillor Holloway's point of maybe reviewing more frequently is a good one. So Matt, do you want to come back in there?
Thank you. I'm sure Teresa and Sarah Jane may want to comment, but in the first instance, I'd like to say that we absolutely know our children. We're working alongside them from our social workers all the way up to senior management level. We know our children. We regularly review the data, but we're out seeing them. We're involved in meetings, whether that's into the evenings or weekends. We want to know our children. This is about relationships. All of our work within Dorset is about building those relationships and trying to be visible with our children and young people. And when they've raised concerns, we come back with that with robust answers and solutions. And where we can't, we work together to resolve them. So for me, it's not just about the data sets that I provide to the corporate parenting board. Yes, that gives us an overview, but it's absolutely knowing our children. And also the other side of things, like, for example, the youth voice team. And we've spoken about at previous corporate parenting boards, the way we engage our young people. How do we engage them in a meaningful way? And I know in future informal meetings, we're going to be having workshops around that. So that answers that in just a snapshot. Should we do question by question, or should I?
You just if you carry on and answer those questions, and then
okay, brilliant.
Sarah Jane and or Teresa want to come in to comment as well, that would be terrific.
No problem. And in terms of reviewing, absolutely, that's I think that's a positive. I want us to stay on track. I want us all to be held accountable for the performance that we're delivering on. We have had significant improvements, but we continue to, because we have high aspirations for our service, for our young people. So we're going to continue to work hard to achieve the best we can for our young people to make sure that they're thriving. And then just in terms of our keeping in touch or contact service, as you mentioned, very much this is about relationships and working through any obstacles with our parents and with our children, and making sure that we base our decisions on how we support on informed assessments, and working together to overcome any of the obstacles, and making use of local resources where we can as well to support all of that. And I'm sorry, there was a question around the SGO, but I didn't quite get it written down. So if I just leave it there because I'm mindful of time. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt, because I think that's a really comprehensive overview of how we work. But just remembering, for our children in care, the social worker is just one part of their life support, really. So they have their QAROs, quality assurance reviewing officers, they have their foster carers or residential carers. So all of us are just given sight to this permanence strategy, really, and how it works. And what's really great for us in Dorset is that all of our social workers work with children in care. Now, it's not always the same in authorities. So for social workers, we make sure that they have the experience of working with children in care, because it's really important to understand the legislation that rightly surrounds our roles and responsibilities as corporate parents, but also there's quite a skill set to working with children who are in foster care or residential care rather than children who are at home. So what this strategy does is it also offers a bit of a framework for our social workers and their managers to make sure that they're in and they're thinking about to do their very best for our children. Councillor Jones, you asked about special guardianship orders. So it's right that when a special guardianship order is made, the parental responsibility stays with the child's parent, but also goes to the person who's got the special guardianship order. At that point, there's a support plan that's put before the court, which is supported by the social worker and also Aspire. And that support plan will really lay out for the family, the special guardianship family, how they can receive support from ourselves, from health services, what they should expect from education, and that along their child's journey, if they feel that they need support with any of those things, they can always absolutely come back to us. So that's what a special guardianship order, the framework says. And Aspire would be the first point of call, and they would get alongside families. And if they felt that they needed to reach out into the partnership, they would do that. So it's right that we let families be families, but there is absolutely a way back in if that support is needed. And those support plans are quite robust. The court, we agree them, the courts also agree them. And so far we've found that they work really well. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just sort of dip in very quickly, Teresa, before I ask you to speak? Catherine, I've got a message here saying that today's meeting appears not to be being broadcast. The viewers are getting August the 5th's meeting. Can you take a look at that for me, please? Right, okay. Well, if we can just respond to the Echo reporter to say that it is on live and perhaps he needs to come out and go back in or something, okay? Okay, that's quite all right. Did you pick that up, Megan?
Yeah, I'll try and sort it out.
Okay, lovely. Thanks very much. Sorry, Teresa, you were going to make a comment.
No worries, Chair. So we're confident we can progress because it is actually being broadcast. It's just that there's one individual's got the wrong link. Is that right? Yeah. Great. Okay, that's lovely. So I'll continue on. Thank you. And Sarah Jane and Matt, really helpful kind of responses, really clear report. I just wanted to pick up a couple of things. I agree with you completely, Chair. I think we should yearly review and publish that yearly review. Absolutely. I also agree, Councillor Biggs, that I think it's important to have the data early on in the meeting. We often have such robust and lively conversations that it gets squeezed, and it's really important for us to track that. I just wanted to kind of very briefly take you through the kind of ways in which I ask myself and answer the question, how do I know? Because I think that's a really important question that you've raised, really. So we have a very robust performance framework. We have a range of dashboards. I can get real-time reporting every day, and I do, into where our children are, what's happening in their lives, and what's really having meaning for them. But actually what I need to get real sense of is where those relationships are working really well. And so getting that feedback from complaints, from compliments, from stars of the week, when colleagues refer each other to me for a star of the week, is a really powerful way in which I hear about the great work that's going on. Lisa Linscott, who's online today, serves us beautifully as a senior leadership team with really good outcomes from the virtual school. You know, it's very much a kind of standard now that Lisa's set herself, and we benefit from, where she brings our children to life in our management meetings on a monthly basis, telling us about what the report has been for a particular child who's often improved, but also keeping a really good track on the children where they're not getting those things. We have practice weeks, we have practice shadow weeks, where all of the senior leaders and beyond, and many members too, can join in to shadow that practice. Sometimes the practitioners who are being shadowed can feel a little bit kind of overwhelmed by that, but they shouldn't do, because all of the learning is with us. Every practice week is a fantastically humbling experience for us, as we remember to enjoy the fabulous practice that people are doing with our children and families. So we know in all sorts of ways. Some of them are data hard ways, and some of them are soft ways. Some of them are social stories. Some of them are from watching practice. Some of them for me are from reading case files. Some of them are from digging in when there's a situation. So just really wanted to kind of share with you, there's a whole plethora of ways in which we know that. But it's also really important that we make sure that we constantly challenge ourselves in that. We've had some really good outcomes in permanency this year. I'm amazed Sarah Jane didn't mention this, because she talks about it constantly. We have had seven little people achieve what we call early permanence. It's a really big number. This is the people, the amazing people who come forward to do what we used to call fostering for adoption. So they foster hoping to be able to adopt, but knowing that that may not be the outcome for that child. And if it's not the outcome, they support that child going home. But obviously people are really putting themselves into a space of some risk with that. And of one of those 7, a 3-year-old, was a big risk, because, you know, we're going to build relationships, but you can see and fully understand that for those children, they have that first relationship. And if that does go through to adoption, then that's a fantastic steady bond, rather than having a fostering placement and then move into an adoption placement. So we call it early permanence, and we've had 7 of them. But we know that even for our 16, 17-year-olds, permanence is everything. And the way they'll achieve more permanence isn't necessarily, they may not end up in a permanent family, but if we can give them the permanence of their place, the permanence of their community, the permanence of their forever links, bringing them back into many, many more people. When children come into care, their world shrinks. It also grows. It grows with professionals and practitioners, but their actual world of connection shrinks dramatically. And so what we want to do is to really enlarge on that as they're coming towards the end of their time in our care too. So we make those links back into their friendships, their family. Because you're right, Councillor Jones, that issue about how do you get people when they're in their most angry stages sometimes, which of course is when children have been removed or when divorce is happening, to keep those really important relationships going. And I think any of us that have been around people or been in that place ourselves know that there's a lot of heat in that situation, and it can become quite contentious, and parental alienation is a real risk for our children. So we're working really closely with our local judiciary around the Pathfinder about setting up a family hub to be able to support people not going into contentious family law proceedings. Sometimes people have to go to court around a divorce and a contact and custody element, but not as often as they do, actually. It is possible to come to these decisions and these arrangements without going into that place. And we know that by the time they get into court, everything tends to get more polarised and therefore more contentious. So we're really looking to get in early on to some of that. And frankly, having a conversation with the fabulous parents of Dorset, which is that if you are separating, if you've chosen not to continue to stay in your partnership, that's one decision. But your responsibility as a responsible parent in our county is to keep those relationships where it's safe to do so, and that's often a difficult stage, with both parents and the parents' parents and the aunts and the uncles, and really get over the difficulties of managing those complex relationships. I won't say too much about it because I could say far too much, because it's a lot of work we're doing, but it is in our purview, Councillor Jones. We're really strongly looking at it, and I think you'll see that coming forward in the next few months.
Thank you very much, Teresa. Is that okay with you, Stella?
Can I just ask if you can't make contact or parents won't want to make contact with the youngster, do you hope to get siblings contact, or does that fall by the wayside if the parents aren't involved?
Yeah, we work really hard to make sure that those siblings have contact. We've got more to do in the adoption world. So there's some areas where we could learn from the adoption world in the rest of the permanency that we do. In the adoption world, you'll know they have something called a letterbox arrangement, which is even if you can't see that child for all sorts of good reasons, you can still send communication, and people hold that in a safe space for them for when they're older. Now, we need to think about that into other areas other than adoption, because we don't have those sorts of systems in place at the present time, nationally or locally. So we need to find ways to do that. Increasingly, siblings are in touch with each other, and we organise sibling contact and make that as fun as possible, so that even if it's only irregular or not so often, the experience and the memory is strong. But maybe we should bring forward, please, Matt, some, in an informal meeting, some social stories around some of those, maybe complex. We know for some of our children that we've got some quite large families, there's some complex sibling contact that goes on, but it's good to see. So can we bring that forward for a future meeting?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks for that suggestion, Teresa. That's good. Thank you very much. I haven't got any other requests to speak in the chat bar on this subject. So we're going to go for accepting the recommendation, but we would like that review to be annually rather than spree. And Matt and I have been talking about how the agenda works, and we still need to do a little bit of work on that. So if we bring up that data set item to closer up so that it doesn't get squashed off at the end. I'm hopeful that once we're starting to meet face to face again, we will time manage in a lot better way anyway, but that would be a better way. But so we'll work at that, Matt, as we've said we were going to do on the whole of the agenda anyway. So that's good. Thank you all very much. We're moving on to item 6, which is the Dorset Council's care leaver strategy. Sarah Jane, would you like to introduce this again, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is our care leaver strategy, and Kirsten and Susan and Matt and really dedicated care leaver team have worked really hard to bring this to us. And I just want us to hold in mind, as I think Kirsten's going to take us through the highlights, we're hoping that in our next meeting in October, which is an informal meeting, that we're going to dedicate the meeting to our care leavers, as it is going to be Care Leaver Week as well. So there's going to be lots of activities that hopefully people will be involved in. So this strategy really sets the scene to allow us as the Corporate Parenting Board to really scrutinise ourselves as to how good our strategy is, as to how good our care leaver offer is. And we're just really grateful also to Councillor Somper, who's stepped in to chair our care leaver delivery group, which sits underneath this board and will report to this board on a regular basis as to progress. And very much that group works to this strategy. So hopefully all of those things neatly fit together. But Kirsten, I'll hand over to you to take us through. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Kirsten Hallett. I am a team manager currently with the Care Leaver service. So I sit underneath Matt, so to speak. We have our new Care Leaver strategy. So it leads on nicely really from Matt's presentation, in that for those children who don't return home and who then become care leavers, we've formed and based our strategy for now on the Dorset Strategic Alliance for Children and Young People plan. So we're sat alongside of that plan. And we've also chosen to look at our strategy based on the information and influence by our own Dorset care leavers who've engaged with us on the New Belongings programme. So I think probably I won't talk hugely about the New Belongings programme, other than it's been a really insightful piece of work that we've been able to do with Quorum Voice amongst we're one of 8 local authorities. And it's about improving services for care leavers, but with care leavers. So very much informed and very much influenced by our own care leavers. So just as a very brief, we conducted a Your Life Beyond Care survey in April last year. And we've also completed a self-assessment of service with our own partners and within our own teams. And the findings from that New Belonging programme have been included in our plan, which is based in from about page 13 of the document. Are there any questions or comments with regards to the plan that I can assist with?
I've got Councillor Carol Jones with a comment, please, or a question. Carol?
Yes, thank you. Well, it's about the whole, I've read everything through quite carefully, and there are a couple of areas that I would really like us to focus on if I'm able to drill down that far. And I would really like us to see some sort of target to ensure that every care leaver leaves education being able to read or write. And I speak from personal experience with people that I've worked with before I moved down to this area. And there were a number who couldn't read or write. And I wonder if we could specifically target that. But I'm also very keen that we take this one step further. Whilst I understand that we have personal advisors, I don't know how often they will sort of check in with the 544 eligible care leavers, but it probably isn't that often. And I'm just wondering how we could actually go about implementing a much more targeted mentoring scheme to really help these people leave care and get into the world of employment, living, the world of life, basically. Because I've seen this work really well in the past, and I think we could just benefit so much from it. So that's really what I wanted to say, but this is on the whole thing rather than specifically what you were just talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Kirsten, did you want to come back on that?
Yes, just to emphasise really, our care leavers, there are a lot of them. Some are in more contact than others. Statutorily, we have a duty to maintain contact at least every 8 weeks with young people. Quite often, it's much more frequent than that. All of our personal advisors have smartphone technology. Lots of our young people use WhatsApp and keep in touch just for just sometimes just to update, almost to say hi, hello, how are you? And we do the same back with those young people. We know that keeping in mind and being able to work alongside young people is essential for actually helping them to achieve their outcomes. So although statutorily we check in every 8 weeks, probably for the majority of our care leavers, other than those who either don't want our services or choose not to respond to us, we probably check in much more frequently than the 8 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to get Councillor Biggs and Councillor Jones to speak, and then bring Sarah Jane and Matt in, because there may be questions that you can answer all in one go. Okay, so Councillor Biggs.
Yes, I was interested in the comments about NEETs on the outcome 5.3 outcome 3, saying that 12% are not able to access due to illness or disability, and that I suppose is to be expected. I'd imagine that's not unusual. What I would like to see, the flip side of that, are there 88% in employment? Because I'm sure I saw that somewhere else, and I can't find it now, that we had a target of something like meeting 60%, which means there's, a load of people at this moment who are not in employment, and the best chance of them, is, I know education critically important, but also employment, to standing up on their own 2 feet, and having all the rest, modern life. There's never been a better opportunity to get a job than now. There really isn't. If there's one benefit of COVID and Brexit, that there is a shortage, such a shortage of skills across the board everywhere. I mean, I've never seen signs on shops, everywhere, aren't there? So what can we do to really open those doors? If there's anything what are the blockers to getting that figure up to 88%? If they're physically fine, they should be working on education. I appreciate there may be some with criminal records, etc., are very difficult, and that may be the issue. I don't know.
Thanks for that. Stella?
Yeah, mine was also about NEET. We obviously don't want youngsters to become NEET because we want them to work and get an education. But sometimes once they start sixth form, they cannot actually access colleges because they live in rural areas where there's no transport, there's no way to get to work or to college. I know we've discussed it before, but how much can we help financially and providing some kind of transport so these youngsters can actually access school or workplaces?
Thank you for that. Councillor Holloway. Ryan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just regarding on 5.5 on the outcome there, where it says Dorset care leavers are in touch, and the figure says of 98%, but that's in brackets of 18 to 21-year-olds. So really, quick question is: do we have any data on the obviously the 22 to 25s? Because obviously this the care leaver system now obviously looks after people up to 25. So do we actually have any data on that at all, on that older age group at all, is my question.
Thank you. Right. Sarah Jane, if I come to you first and then let Matt come in afterwards.
Absolutely, thank you, Chair. And I know that Kirsten will be ready for some of the detail that might be needed just to answer some of the questions. I'm hoping I've got these in order. So Councillor Jones, thank you very much for opening the conversation really about mentoring for our young people. So absolutely in our line of sight within the care leaver delivery group. And actually we've had 2 very senior leaders from the council come forward already to offer to be mentors for our young people. Maybe things like they're going for a job interview, just to do some practice questions, just to think about what to wear. Or it could be university applications, a whole manner of things really. But we really want to expand that as far as we can. So with yourselves, with local business leaders who also we're making contact with to do that. So under the care leaver delivery group, we're thinking about mentoring and really thinking about apprenticeships, because I think now is the time. And just as colleagues and members here are saying, there are opportunities, but to take opportunities, all of us know you have to feel ready to do that. You have to feel a bit confident to do that. And for some of our young people, that's not the space that they feel they're in. So us getting alongside is absolutely the right thing to do. And also local businesses working with us to know that maybe on day one, day 2, day 3 might be a bit tricky, but knowing that a young person's got support to make day 4, day 5 better and even better, is we know that works really well. So keeping a really close eye to that. And reading, writing, basic IT skills, which now are just so crucial for everybody, really, absolutely again in our line of sight for our young people. So Kirsten and the team are aware of where young people are at academically and able to wrap around support if needed. We have responsibility, as Councillor Holloway said, right up until our young people are 25, and as Kirsten will tell you, and beyond, because we don't just say, actually, you're 26 now, so we can't talk to you. You know, we are a family, and we'll make sure we always give advice. We always give a bit of a steer. So all of those things are there for our young people, but the crucial part is making sure that young people can leave school, you know, primary school, able to read and write and to have those basic skills, and that's absolutely our priority. Just thinking about Councillor Biggs, the NEET figures that we talked about, you're absolutely right, we've got to really stretch ourselves here. So it is an improving picture for us, but it's not where we want to be. So I think, and again, forgive me colleagues, everything's frozen for me, but we're getting to sort of 60% of our young people who are in employment, education and training, but we know we need to keep pushing and pushing that up. So Kirsten, there are plans in place just to keep pushing through. I just want to check with you that I'm not giving people duff figures.
No,
That's right.
figures are
Brilliant.
accurate, Sarah Jane.
Excellent. That's great.
We have several young people also who are unable to work due to being a parent. Sometimes it's about life choices as well. So the young people who are not in education, we have a disproportionate amount of young people who are unwell or self-reported, signed off by the GP. We have had COVID, and I think that has hit us significantly for our care leavers locally as well.
Thank you, Kirsten. And Kirsten, can I just ask you, so just thinking about Councillor Jones's question regarding young people getting to college and education and the rurality issues that we have, can you just describe for colleagues and for members how we support our young people to get to where they need to get to?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Every care leaver is entitled to claim what is called a guaranteed bursary from their college as well. So this is a sum of £1,200 per year. So for those young people, sixth form and above, so it, further education, not higher education, they're able to claim that bursary between the ages of 16 and 19. So that's an additional amount of money in order to pay for books, trips, any of the transport issues that those young people might have. In addition to that, if there are gaps, we're there to fill those gaps if needed. So young people can come to us and say, actually, I've got my bus ticket. I still need this, this, and this. How can you help us with that? And we put together bespoke packages for young people based on need, really. Just to come back to the there was a question about the transport issues. The other thing that we also do is not just for formal education, but if we have a young person that's looking at work experience, that's looking at some volunteering, that first soft step towards employability skills, we can actually provide some financial assistance for young people to help with that transport, because I think you're right, transport for young people getting to college, getting there at the right time, the buses in the rural areas aren't particularly frequent. There is a big problem, but it's also a big problem when young people are trying to look for work too. And I think sometimes just having the finances to make sure that you can get onto the bus or the train, to go to your work experience, to go to your voluntary place, so that you can build on those skills, improve your CV, and then obviously when you then move on to your first employer, before you've got paid, we can assist with getting young people to and from their employment as well. Can I just respond as well? I think it was Councillor Holloway, you asked why 18 to 21-year-olds? For our NEET figures, I know our In Touch figures, sorry. The reason that is the DfE ask for our reports on that particular age group. So we have a ready report as such through the DfE that is produced annually. So those figures are very, very attainable for us, which is why it's 18 to 21. I anticipate the DfE will ask us to return on those young people 22 to 25, and I think that would be a right thing to do. At the moment, we don't, which is why we don't actually report on that number, if that makes sense. However, we could probably anecdotally, the young people whom we are continuing to work with that still want a service at 21, we would ensure are contacted on that 8 weekly basis as a minimum, unless they have made a decision with their PA to do something more bespoke to them. I don't know if that helps explain.
Thank you. Thank you. Matt, did you want to come in?
I think they've covered everything I was going to say, Councillor Wheeler. Thank you.
Right, that's good. And thank you all for those questions. They're really useful. On the mentoring situation, Kirsten, it's a comment more than anything else. I don't necessarily need a response, but a lot of the schools do mock interviews, and some of our young people won't be going to schools that do that. And if we can just sort of bear that in mind, because I think, you know, going through that experience as a mock before you have to do it for real is jolly useful. And the other thing we've spoken a few times now about the mentoring, and it's good to see that people are coming forward to do that mentoring. But I think it would be quite nice, and as we come back more into normality, if we can do a bit of a marketing push, as it were, among our own staff and councillors who would be prepared to do that mentoring a little bit more. People who are available in the fields that our young people are keen to explore. So can we put that sort of as a note that is something that we requires us to do a little bit more work, perhaps put our thinking caps on how we can achieve that as we go forward. And the other thing, Kirsten, you were talking about the bursaries and that we're in a position to fill a gap if the bursary doesn't quite cover a young person's need. How do they know about that? How do we get that knowledge of the bursary and extra help to them? You know, are we constantly telling them about that, or do we just hope that they pick it up, or what?
No, through their personal advisor. So each personal advisor has a very close link with their young person. We also have a website within Dorset Council which outlines our financial package for young people, so young people are able to link in there. With the bursary, the colleges we work with in Dorset are very, very good. They approach us for the letter. We write a letter for our young people to evidence their care leaver status. Colleges request those, so we don't have to be pushing on doors. The doors are already very much open. Sometimes young people need reminding about the apprenticeship bursaries because they're not as well known about, which is what we do obviously for young people that happen to be an apprentice. There's a care leaver bursary for every apprentice after, I think it's 6 months of being in that apprenticeship.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. Members, any other questions on item 6 before we move on to 7? I've got nothing in the chat bar, so we will move on to item 7.
Councillor Holloway has a physical hand up, actually.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Holloway, I didn't see that.
Chair, I did put RTS in the chat there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do apologise.
Sorry, that's okay, Madam Chair. Just to quickly come back to the obviously, Kirsten, thank you for answering my question. First of all, I am a bit surprised that the DFE has not asked for those results between 22 to 25-year-olds, because a lot of, particularly, there's now more and more in that age group, particularly as we've already mentioned about apprenticeships, and particularly as well, the government's doing the Kickstarter scheme, which is of course supporting young people up to 24. So I am a little bit surprised that they're not obviously obtaining or even asking for that data at all. That I do find that a bit surprising, considering that there are more and more sort of people coming into their sort of early 20s that are doing further education in one form or of a way. So I don't know what other members or portfolio holder feels about that, but I think that's something I think the DFE should really help concentrate a bit more, particularly with more young people in education and for retraining particularly for employment. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Stella Jones. I don't know whether you wanted to come in again there, and then I've got Councillor Andrew Parry.
It's only a quick one. I don't know whether the team is aware that there are charities that provide funds for youngsters going to further education. There's one in Dorchester, the Municipal Charities, which gives money to youngsters to buy books, etc. So presumably there are these things in other towns as well. And the youngsters that we're talking about would certainly be able to have some of those funds.
Yeah, we have the same in Weymouth, and I know that Weymouth Town Charities spends a good deal of time letting schools and various bodies know about the funds that are available. Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to sort of respond to Councillor Holloway as he directed a particular point in my direction. I would strongly suspect that we will see review in a number of areas of DFE policy following yesterday's reshuffle of government, and perhaps some of those areas where we feel that we currently don't have the level of engagement with them that they perhaps wanted. We will see that being addressed fairly quickly, I would anticipate, given some of the boldness of yesterday's moves. What I did also want to reflect on, if I may, was the point that actually Councillor Biggs raised there, which is the work opportunities. And it's this real frustration that there are some fantastic work opportunities out there for young people. And that they may be frustrated by things like their ability to get to interviews, to be prepared for an interview process. Even if, for example, one of the great liberators in my working life was actually passing my driving test when I was 17 years old, and that opened up a wealth of opportunities. Because what that does do is, once you're in that settled work environment, that connection that we spoke about, that wider friendship circles, those work colleagues, those mentors, everybody that you require in your life to help you along the path of stability and settled adulthood, which is where we want to see every young person who has been in our care, those are accelerated by being in a settled work environment. We know that excels for people. So yes, we should be looking to do that. I have a lot of sympathy, though, on the point of trying to pass your driving test at the moment, because as I understand it, one of the issues that we've had as a result of COVID is it's incredibly difficult to actually get a place with a driving instructor at the moment. It's another one of those areas. So we are going to see a great source of, there's great opportunity, which Richard's alluded to, but I'm also very aware that there are some hurdles that we have to help our young people overcome in order to give them that best opportunity. I'm not going to steal Lisa Linscott's thunder in the areas of the virtual school. I wouldn't dare, but I know she will want to talk about it. Yes, there is a focus clearly on English and maths. That's understandable. But what we don't necessarily want to see is such a focus on those areas that we see a drop off in perhaps the humanity type things, the arts and creative side of qualifications. So there's again a balance to be struck there in how we achieve that. Because yes, great to leave with maths and English, but if as a result of that, you've actually missed the opportunity to gain, say, 6 qualifications, that may get you further along that particular path. We need to understand our young people and what we can get, how we can help them to get the best out of them academically. So hopefully I've given you a very quick resume of the points I've heard in the discussions so far.
Thanks very much, Andrew. That's very good. And going back to your opening comment about cabinet reshuffles and new responsibilities and so on, we will trust that you're in a great position to have an input there as things go forward. Lisa Linscott, did you want to speak?
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up the point about mock interviews, because I think that's a really relevant point, and I will go back to all of our secondary schools, get the information back from them about which secondary schools are giving mock interviews, and then for the children in schools that aren't, we will ensure within the virtual school that we provide them with a mock interview. So you have my guarantee around that for this year for our Key Stage 4 students, for this year and going forward, obviously.
That's excellent. Thanks very much. I know that Budmouth Academy do that. I've been involved in it for some years. I'm not anymore, but I know from feedback from those young people how useful they've found it. As I say, getting that interview, that first interview under their belt, and the feedback that they get in a soft, friendly environment, they find very useful. So that's terrific. Thank you very much indeed. We're not doing too badly for time, better than I often am. Item 7, emotional health and well-being in schools. This is Miriam. Vic, I can't see his name's Vic here.
Sure, Councillor Wheeler, apologies. Teresa Levy will introduce the next topic.
Right, lovely, thank you. Teresa, if I can leave that to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies from Vic Berman this evening. Here's a conflicting appointment. I just wanted to say equally, sometimes our children in care, before I introduce this next bit, and our care leavers need particular equipment to do work. You know, this is the kind of establishing things. Please be assured that the care leavers team are fully authorised to do any of those things and do for anything that young people want to try out. So again, I think we can probably be braver and bolder in the future around bringing some of those social stories forward. We've just written a cabinet report. No, it's not a cabinet report, it's an overview report, where we've been putting in a number of stories, and it's a kind of commitment I want to give to all of our reports, because it does bring it to life for us all, I think. So just remembering, celebrate those good things that you're doing. Kirsten, thank you for that report, but you are doing some amazing things, so do bring some of those examples into other reports in the future. Right, other people who are doing amazing things include the lovely Miriam Lee, who is bringing forward an update report on our children's emotional well-being. You know, this is an area that we've had real concerns and worries about, and particularly through the pandemic, because we know that for some of our children, not for all of our children. I was meeting a child last evening who had a fantastic lockdown. Actually, not one of our children in care, but one of our children of interest and who we work with, and has had a very good lockdown in terms of their experience. And we know that's true for many, but not for all. So, Miriam, I'm going to hand over to you to tell us the progress that we're making around making sure that, firstly, we understand what our children's emotional well-being needs are, and secondly, that we're being able to resource and support them being met.
Thank you, Teresa, and good evening, and thank you, Councillor Weller. Yes, so I have predominantly, I think, what Teresa, what we really have worked hard on trying to do and is understand using the data that we are meant to be doing. So using the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire, and I know that you are all aware that that has improved from the previous reports that's reported on to this meeting, and you can see that we have improved the number of children who have had an SDQ completed. It's shortened to SDQ because it's a bit of a mouthful, Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire. And you can see that actually the percentage completed for our children in care who've been in care for over 12 months has improved. And you can also see that what we have also noticed is, because, not necessarily because of the numbers being completed, but the average score has come down. So we are now at a score of around 15.4, I think it is the average score, which is still in a slightly elevated. So it's still an area where we want to focus, and they are any child who has a slightly elevated child. We've implemented a policy and practice guidance of any child who has a score that's slightly elevated. We would expect the social workers and to share that data, to have conversations with the appropriate professionals, looking at the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire to understand what lies behind it, because the questionnaire itself gives you a score, but actually it's what does it tell you? It's the information and the detail behind it that's important. So we've been doing a lot of work in training and supporting our workforce to understand those questionnaires and understand what they mean, and to implement them, and sharing it more broadly, sharing it alongside information about what activities and services are available. So we've done a lot of work around mapping the different services across from education support services to right across to health services, including our CAM services, from consultation to training to direct work with young people and the people that support all those services. So there's still work to do, as we can see, in terms of the cause for concern percentage is high, and we don't report on that, but we know that our cause for concern is still quite a high number. So we've still got some work to do to understand that, and we're doing quite a bit of work about trying to track how come and finding out a little bit more detail around those children, because it could be there are other factors that are contributing to it. So as I've said, it could be due to things like neurodevelopmental disorders. They might well have an education, health and care plan for a child with social, emotional, mental health, which would indicate that there are reasons and they've got persistent needs. So we need to make sure we are referencing all our data and tracking that, and we're in a process of doing that. And then coming in onto schools, you were just talking about schools, and I was listening to Lisa and Councillor Weller talking about the schools and the offer that schools can provide. And as we know, schools are an incredibly protective factor for many, many children. They are a place of safety. They're a place where children who are in care can feel more like other children. They don't, and that's really important, that we recognise how protective those relationships in schools are for many of our children in care. And in order to support our schools, it's really important that we help them understand that sometimes things go wrong for our children in care in schools. And if they are feeling well, then they will progress and they will learn. we know that the impact on physical and mental health are essential in terms of being able to learn and progress. And talking earlier about, we know that, you know, ideally academic attainment wouldn't be such a currency, but it is, and it does matter. And we know it does matter, and it does matter that we work and we support our young people to attain the best they possibly can, and to be able to. And so by providing support around our schools to understand what those nuances are around, particularly around children in care and those more vulnerable groups, is really important. Supporting them around attachment and trauma, and having that trauma-informed approach is one of the things we've really been working on. And we have a number of schools that we've done some really positive work, and we can really see that in terms of the way they're approaching that and what they're telling us in terms of the number of children who are experiencing exclusions from their vulnerable groups, including the children in care, has come down significantly as a result of them understanding and changing their approach to these children. I've focused on the sort of the interventions that support particularly our children in care. So we had some investment from the government about wellbeing for education, and that focused on trauma and understanding the differences between persistent developmental trauma and one-off trauma. Most people recover from trauma with having a resilient context, and supporting our schools to understand that. And we're building on that this academic year. We're providing further support to the schools to build on that. And we had a lot of schools engage in that, engage in the training, engage in those network supports and peer support. We're also doing a lot of work around developing those problem solving skills. So again, that's around supporting young people to develop their thinking, and intervening with schools early at that early years. Actually, that's all around early years and primary age, to develop our children to develop those skills and thinking skills, because if we can work with schools to support our young people to develop those thinking skills, it supports them in their well-being and their social skills, and therefore their academic attainment. We know we've got more work to do. I know Louise Smith, she is going to talk more about the health aspects, and both of us have actually referred a little bit to the clinical psychologists in our reports. I'll leave that to Louise to talk more about that. But are there any questions around the work about schools and schools' emotional wellbeing?
Thank you very much, Miriam. I've got Councillor Ryan Holloway and then Councillor Carol Jones, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report, Miriam. Just one quick, just for clarity, where you said obviously it's good to see that the SDQ figures have improved, because I've been quite worried about those, particularly during the pandemic as well, because it's been quite, as you know, it's been very tough on our young people. But as to regard about the questionnaires, have we simplified them, or have we sort of made the process a lot more straightforward for our team to able to process those better? Because you said that obviously you've done more training, which is really good, but just don't know if you can just clarify on that, please.
So the questionnaire itself is a standardized questionnaire, so you can't simplify it. It has to be as it is.
Okay.
What we have done is work hard on implementing a workflow as part of that. When a child comes into care, there's a process that a social worker has to go through, and which will then send out the questionnaire to the foster carers. Working really hard with our service managers and heads of service, and Lisa Linscott as well, around making sure that the information is shared, that it's triangulated. So that's what's really made the improvement, is just the language of it. Everywhere we are mentioning the strengths and difficulties questionnaire. In the leadership meetings, when children are discussed about coming into care, that's one of the things that's, it's an obsession of ours. So that's what's made the difference.
Right, good, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carol Jones.
Thank you. I was just wondering, with the questionnaire, would you get the child and their carer to fill in the same questionnaire, because I would imagine it would be quite interesting to see whether the carer picks up on some of the issues. And I was also wondering whether you are seeing a common thread in either strengths or weaknesses that has taken you a little bit by surprise, whether that's meant you've had to implement a new way of working or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question. So there are different questionnaires. So there are 3 questionnaires for the strengths and difficulties questionnaire. The one we have to do is the carer one. So all foster carers are asked to complete a strengths and difficulties questionnaire about it's a behavioural screen. It's a screening tool really, and they ask 25 questions, simple questions, rate on a rating scale. Young people over 11 can complete an individual questionnaire, and they are the same sorts of questions, and then we would look at it. And teachers, there's also a teacher questionnaire. So particularly if we have a score which is a cause for concern, we would be expecting to have all 3 completed, so we can look at that. Is it in one area? Is it across the board? And then start to look at, is it around emotional symptoms, social skills, peer relationships? So we haven't yet got to a stage where we can really drill down to say, is this the area where we're really noticing there's an issue? And that's some work we're beginning to start to really do that now.
Thank you. Councillor Stella Jones?
Yeah, I think my question is just about being answered. I was thinking of putting all the pieces together to make sure where the problem is. It's, you know, like finishing the jigsaw, isn't it? And I'm pleased to hear that you do work with everybody together to do that, because that is so important to get the right outcome for these youngsters.
Yeah, thank you, Steph. And it's Councillor Jones. It's a complex arena, emotional well-being. There are lots of factors that play into it, and it is important that we do, you know, and also every child is very different. So the voice of the child is important, as you rightly said, Councillor Jones, around getting their view of what their view is. They might complete a questionnaire, but then when you ask them, well, what do you think you need? It could be completely different to what we think they need. So we need to work with them, just as you were saying, around, you know, children, young people who are NEET and moving into employment. You have to go at the right pace for them. And the whole point of mental health is to support people to understand their well-being and mental health. We all have ups and downs. We you know, many of us will know people who have experienced mental health problems. They learn how to manage it and cope, and that's the whole principle behind it, is we lean in to support people to understand that and reduce the risks.
Thank you. Councillor Carol Jones, did you want to come back, or shall I move on to Sarah Jane?
No, I'm just wondering whether there were any common threads that had taken you a little bit by surprise, but you didn't mention that, but not as yet. Work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sarah Jane.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to talk about our relationship with partners in CAMHS, and Miriam and Matt have been working really, really hard with colleagues to make sure that for our children in care, there's a really clear line of sight as to the services that our children are receiving, not just from ourselves, but also from the CAMHS service. It's an ongoing piece of work, and I just really welcome the opportunity to come back into this meeting to be able to report an update as to how that's progressing, to make sure that the strategy is very clear, the CAMHS strategy for children in care and care leavers, and that we can give really good information about waiting times, outcomes, and just how successful outcome-wise that service is being. So I think it's not a conversation for here, but just to know, for you to know that we're working on that to bring that back to you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That's helpful. Can I ask you to move us on into agenda item 8 in that case, Sarah Jane? Health of looked after children.
Sorry, Chair, couldn't find my mute button. Absolutely. So just real neat segue, actually, and I think Miriam probably set this up quite well for us. So I'm just going to hand over. I believe I'm handing over to Louise.
Louise, yes.
Yeah, just to be able to give highlights from her report, and I know Louise will be happy to take any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Jane, and thank you, Councillor Weller. Hello, everybody. My name's Louise Smith. I'm the designated nurse for children in care and care leavers for Dorset CCG after taking over from Penny early last year with her retirement. So I still feel like I'm fairly new in the job. Am I allowed to still say that? Still get away with that? So here's the outlines from my report. I'm happy to be presenting that tonight, and my report reflected the difficult year that everybody has had. But actually what it did also reflect was the recovery plans that were put in place and how everybody worked together to work towards that. So to address the backlog following redeployment for some of our nursing staff, and how the IHA service was prioritised during that time, and that's allowed us the need to change how services are delivered and different ways of working, and those have remained. Some of them have remained post lockdown. So particularly around children and young people's voice in how they would like their health assessments to be completed with them. So rather than taking it as a blanket approach that we see everybody face to face, actually, would they prefer a WhatsApp call? Would they prefer a virtual platform? And that works alongside the sort of risk and assessment analysis that the team do in knowing their children. And I think that's a real strength. I would say that for Teresa, you were saying earlier about how important it is to know our children, and that's exactly what our Children in Care health team do. They know every single child. So work is ongoing to address meeting the 20-day time frame for IHA, and we're seeing some huge improvements with that, and that's been really positive. And I'd really like to thank Matt and Louise and Miriam. We've all worked together to kind of iron out some of the issues and make the improvements that we've needed to. So, and we are starting to see that being a bit more sustained. So that's brilliant. I continue to seek the voice of a child, young person through my links with the participation groups, most recently with New Belongings, and that was really helpful. It's really great to hear directly from them what's bothering them and how we can listen to them to shape our services. We've heard about how the numbers of care leavers are rising, and meeting their need is an issue at the moment. We have work in progress to think about how we transform the care leaver role. So we have plans in progress to make that more of a transition role, supporting the 17-year-olds as they come into adulthood, and alongside the health passports and supporting and training with the personal advisors too. We've completed work to align health and social care data, because at the start of the year it was very clear that we weren't reporting on the same things, so we couldn't have the same outcomes. And through work again with Matt and Louise, we've managed to work really hard to align our reporting so that we're kind of working towards the same goal, which has been really valuable. And one of the positive outcomes that we've had recently is along the line for dental access for our children in care, and through some links through the Southwest and our dental commissioners, they're now prioritising children in care as one of the vulnerable groups, which initially wasn't happening. So we now have quite a robust escalation process, that if children in care are not being seen by their dentist for whatever reason, then that gets escalated through to the team and then to me, and then I can go to the dental commissioners with specific examples, which is working well. We've seen an increase in strategy meetings, which is impacting on our children in care performance figures. Not so much in Dorset, but for across Dorset, which is impacting because the team is a Pan Dorset team. So it has an impact for everybody. So that's the highlights for my report. So invite any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, anybody have anything you want to have answered? Right. I've got Teresa first and then Councillor Carol Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, actually, Louise, we're incredibly grateful for the work that you've done in the short period of time you've been here. Absolutely, you can be assured, board, that the grip on getting these things done is really tight and it's joint, and I think that's really a huge progress. So I just wanted to say thank you, Louise, before people come into really let's look at the detail of this. It's so important, but I'm really just feeling very grateful for Louise's work with colleagues within Dorset Council too. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Teresa.
Thank you, Teresa.
Councillor Stella Jones. Sorry, Councillor Carol Jones and Councillor Stella Jones.
No relation to Stella, although she's very nice, obviously. I hope I'm not going to sound a bit naive here, but I'm looking at the corporate parent data set on page 104. We've got the percentage of children in care with an EHCP. Do all children in care have an EHCP? Because you've got there the percentage of children, I'm sorry, I'm coming back to reading and writing again, and the percentage is sort of 49–50%, and I'm wondering what the percentage is overall with those that don't have an EHCP. I just feel we've got to be targeting to make sure every child leaves reading and writing, and I don't see children then that don't have an EHCP, or am I looking in the wrong place?
Can I come in there?
Yes, please.
So you're absolutely right, Councillor Jones, that is the figure for children who have got an EHCP. But the other figure that is on our scorecard is around children with special educational needs that don't always have a EHCP. So that is something that is flagged, and it's something that is commented on and assessed at every child in care's health assessment. So if it's felt at that health assessment annually, or for the under fives, it's twice a year, that extra support is needed, then that's what's advocated and put in the healthcare plan. And additionally to what you're very rightly saying about reading and writing, what we would like to work on is around speech and language. And supporting children when they need it, not after the horse is bolted. And where you probably know around children who go through the youth offending service, that actually there's a speech and language therapist, and we always feel that actually that needs to happen earlier, because the trajectory for these children who aren't able to communicate in the same way or process information in the same way needs to start earlier, so we can avoid that.
Could we see that in some sort of form on the reports that come through, so that we can actually gauge what percentage of children are coming through with these issues still at care leaver stage?
Do you mean from a speech and language perspective?
I think both. I think speech and language and reading and writing. It's just that, you know, without reading and writing and being able to fill out the basics of an application form for a job, they're lost, aren't they?
Yeah. Or maybe that's something that Lisa and I can get together.
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Coming back on what Councillor Jones was just saying, and something that Councillor Parry said, that he found it a huge enabling to pass his driving test at 17 years old. I've always been of the opinion that, you know, when people say, oh, I can't cook, or I can't sew, or I'm not a very good gardener, I truly believe if you can read, you can actually do anything, because there are instructions. But if you can't read, you are seriously disadvantaged. And in the 21st century, that anyone does not have basic reading skills, shame on us, really. I feel very strongly about that. So thank you very much, Councillor Jones, for keep mentioning it. Councillor Stella Jones, I know you need to leave fairly soon, so please.
Only just on the speech, I think before you learn to read, you have to learn to speak, and you have to learn to communicate. And I know there has been a shortage of speech therapists. Obviously, because of COVID, a lot of youngsters, babies and little young children are not getting the communication because nobody's talking to them. I can see a lot more speech therapy needed. Have we still got a shortage of speech therapists? And can I come back on a second point about children in care are now going to be able to be vaccinated? Do we give permission for that, or do we have to go back to families?
So the issue around the speech and language therapy team is something I'll have to come back to you on. It's not something that I've got particular figures on in front of me, but I can find that out.
Thank you. And vaccinations?
Vaccinations. So we've actually asked for a meeting tomorrow to discuss. Matt's smiling because he knows, so that we can discuss this very issue, because it is we need to have a process in place, and we need to get it in place really quickly. So for our children in care who have a care order, then there is a possibility that if delegated authority is in place, then this can be used. But because it's not a routine vaccine, we need to just 100% make sure that we can put it in that category for our children, and on a Section 20. So with shared parental, with where the parental responsibility stays with the parents, then the parents will need to give consent.
Thank you very much. Councillor Richard Biggs. Richard.
Yeah, the only thing I couldn't see that sort of jumped out at me in the report was to do with sort of food and eating disorders, and picking up, you know, the amount of allergies and things that are going around that don't always get picked up until you know, really later in life. You know, I was speaking to somebody who didn't discover I was celiac until I was, you know, late 50s. And yet I could, looking back over childhood, I could see I was getting the symptoms, you know, throughout my life, really. And I know, you know, anorexia and obesity is also a factor. I'm assuming that screening will pick up some of these, but sometimes a simple blood test can pick up things just like that, you know, which happened to me.
Yeah. So we have key performance indicators. And one of those is around the referrals made as a result of a health assessment. So that's the nurse's responsibility when they see a child for their health assessment, that if they pick up there are additional needs, that actually they then refer them either to the GP, or it could be to the eating disorder service. There's a whole range of different professionals and services that they will refer to, and that's captured within our data set.
Good. I mean, the other thing is so many, you know, are changing to vegan diets and things like that, which, you know, if you're not careful, can lead to serious deficiencies in protein. And it's, you know, if they're not following it well, you know, taking bad advice. So would there be support for a dietitian or something if that was an issue? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. We have dietitian services within Dorset Healthcare, and that's who the nurse is. But also, it's around training for our and support for our foster carers in kind of making sure that the diet that they're offering is meeting the World Health Organization guidelines on the healthy plate and healthy portions, and that's part of the nurse's responsibility to be assessing that.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Lisa, you wanted to come in?
Thank you, Chair. We've moved on a little, but I just wanted to clarify our percentages of children with an EHCP who are on SEND support in the virtual school. So in terms of statutory school age children, and obviously this does change as children come in and out, but currently it's 37.6% of the statutory school age cohort have an EHCP, and 25.1% are on SEND support. And in terms of our post-16 cohort, 33.7% have an EHCP, and 17.3% are on SEND support. So those figures are higher than you would see in a national cohort of all children, but you would expect that within a virtual school cohort. That's fairly standard.
Thank you very much for that. Matt, you want to come in?
Thanks, Councillor Wheeler. I think we've moved on slightly, other than for me just to say with regards to the COVID vaccination. I know we've got a meeting tomorrow, Louise. We would always do that in partnership with parents where we can, and look to discuss that with them, even if we have, say, for example, a care order.
Thanks,
Thank you very much. Right, Matt, it's you now anyway. So, oh, sorry, I've got Teresa Levy wants to speak, and then Councillor Lugg, and then I'll ask you to come back in, Matt.
Sure.
Teresa.
Thank you. It was Councillor Biggs's point really prompted me to think about we don't often discuss in this board, but but I think maybe we should, and maybe agenda for a future time, about religious, spiritual and cultural matters being well responded to as well. And I was thinking, Councillor Biggs, when you were talking about diet and dietary requirements and some of the sensitivities around those matters that are so important to our children with diversity. So I just think maybe we could put that on a future agenda. I think, you know, lots of our children do have spiritual and religious requirements, or not, and all of them important. So it'd be helpful for us just to kind of get a sense of how we're paying attention to that in a future meeting.
Thank you for that. That's a very useful point. Councillor Lugg, and thank you for managing the IT and joining us.
I now have a spanking new broadband, super fast, super expensive as well. I just wanted to ask what the procedure will be if there's a dispute about COVID vaccinations, because some of the parents may be anti-vax, or they may want the vaccination but the child doesn't. So are we going to have a procedure that we follow that deals with that?
Do you want me to come in?
Please.
Absolutely, Councillor Lugg. So it's a thorny issue. It's only been agreed this week that 12 to 15-year-olds universally will have the COVID vaccine. And we have a strong vaccination team within Dorset Healthcare, but also within the CCG, who are following JCVI guidance on a daily basis. And what's come out recently is that it will be parental choice, but obviously taking into account the capacity and the competence of the children who will be receiving the vaccine. So it's early days, but that's what we're planning to be talking about over the next few days. We've got a very short time scale to get it up and running, and it will be our school immunisation team who deliver that.
I'm just wondering about the clinically vulnerable children, you know, whether we will take it further, whether we'll do best interest or even take it as far as a court, you know.
That's all being in discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As I understand, Louise, I was reading today that where there are children who are deemed to have the capacity to make their own decision, and parents are vaccine refusers, that child can go to one of the walk-in clinics and get their vaccination, so that the school isn't then involved in a sort of child-parent dispute. So that will be interesting to see how that will pan out as it goes on. And yes, Teresa, I listened to that discussion myself, and it was very interesting. So certainly worth a listen again for anyone who is interested in picking up those thoughts and opinions. It was a useful little piece. Right, Matt, it is you now, please.
Thank you. It's quite strange, actually. As I'm going through this focus data set, we've touched on so many of the topics that I was going to raise, but that's a good thing, I guess. I just wanted to start with our permanence planning. We've obviously maintained quite a high level for our children having permanence plans, but what we are starting to see is that achievement rate starting to creep up, which is really important. That's where we're getting them through that journey of permanence. So, for example, our permanence plans, whilst they're up at 97% odd, we are at 30% last month, and up to today 33%, just over 33%. And I'm hoping with the new processes that have only just recently gone live over the last month, we'll start to see even more traction with achieving permanence. And what I mean by that is we've streamlined some of our processes around long-term fostering, around reunification. around early permanence adoption, things like that. So I'm really hoping that we see that number keep going up, because certainly throughout our organization, there's a big drive for us to get this right for our children and know our children. So I wanted to just lead with that as we had the permanent strategy today. Another positive that I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention is really around our care leavers. You know, we got up to 268 in the data pack that you had in July, and you know, our keeping in touch rates are still up in the 90s, you know, 97%. The feedback that we've had from our care leavers, and certainly in the meetings that I've attended with them, is very much they welcome the support from our personal advisors, you know, and I know that we know our children and we try to get alongside them early on so that we have that relationship when they come into the care leavers service. So I just wanted to highlight that. And then in terms of our education, employment and training rates, I just wanted to confirm absolutely our good or outstanding neighbours are sitting around 55.4%. We're at 55 in that report, but we aspire to be higher than that. We want to lead the way. I honestly want us to be the best corporate parents we absolutely can nationally. So we're looking at 60 plus for that, and we continue to work hard towards that. So let's just watch that space. I know that this is a bit of a positive, but also just a little bit of a query from me around the initial health assessments. We've worked really closely with our health colleagues, Louise Smith. I mean, how many meetings have we had? You know, Jenna Pitt, you know, our child and care and care leaver nurse, and we've really worked hard to get a consensus in time. And locally within Dorset, we absolutely are meeting our targets. You know, and we're always looking to improve, but you know, we're in a fairly good place. Where we're having some challenges are the outer counties, and you know, between Louise and myself, we've been escalating and driving that through. But that is an obstacle, as you know, other local authorities, other areas we have less control over, and they are under pressure as well. So I just wanted to raise that as a potential for the future to affect our performance. In terms of our dental checks, absolutely, Louise, I wanted to raise that's quite a positive for us that our children in care are seen in that vulnerable group, so they should be a priority. And where if we're not able to access, we have a clear escalation process that will absolutely make sure our children are seen as a priority by the dentist. So I just wanted to mirror that. We're up at 42%, but I'm hoping and I envisage that number will keep growing now that that decision's been made within the Southwest. Another point to focus on, and I know we've spoken we've had a report and spoken about the SDQs and the number of it. We're absolutely tracking and building our data around our children within Dorset and understanding their journey and what emotional support they're accessing. But there's also an element of doing that for the you know 40.9%, so 161 odd children that are placed out of area between 5 and 17. So we absolutely know their story, absolutely know if there's any barriers, challenges, so that we can overcome them as quickly as possible, and accessing not only CAMHS but emotional supports at varying levels. But again, we're doing that in partnership with our colleagues, and it's I know, Louise, you're saying you're fairly new to post, but it's been absolutely great working with you. So we're getting there. I can see the progress that we're making. And quite quickly as well. So thank you. That was it in terms of the data focus from me. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Matt. Colleagues, any questions for Matt? Councillor Holloway.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you again, Matthew, for obviously highlighting those figures. Again, I just wanted to just reiterate, particularly with the care leavers, you know, of employment, obviously employment, education or training, obviously we're still below that average we are for the national thing, and that's something I think would be really good if we can possibly work harder. Obviously, unfortunately, I know for some of our young people, when it does come to employment or training, often one of the biggest barriers is normally mode of transport, which I know we already have highlighted a lot in this meeting this evening already, but it's also really just trying to help break those barriers as well, because that's often what holds particularly young people down, particularly as we are a dominantly rural county as well. That's often one of the problems, is they can't get to college, or maybe the job that they've been offered is just physically too far away for them to reach. So I think that's something we just need to, I think, keep an eye on. We do for our care leavers.
Thank you, Councillor Holloway. Sorry, could I come back to that? Sorry,
Yes, please do.
Councillor Holloway, actually, in terms of the Care Leaver Covenant, I know we've had that before, and we've got Care Leaver Week coming up. That's actually one of the topics that we're going to do as a bit of a workshop with the board. I don't want to get us too ahead on it, but we're absolutely focused on that, and hopefully you'll be able to attend, and we should have quite a good session in our next corporate parenting board.
Well, I look forward to that. As I say, I think that's something that, as I said, you know, we have to try and work as best we can with that, because that would break down a huge barrier for our young care leavers.
Absolutely.
I wonder, Councillor Holloway, whether that's a piece of work that we need to be doing, all of us need to be doing with Councillor Bryan, with his improvements to the bus services and the bus strategy, because it's certainly where there are buses, they don't necessarily go where people need to be. You know, you talk about rural areas, but if you live on Portland and you want to get to the Granby estate where most employment is, you can't do it easily by bus. You have to go into Weymouth and take another bus, and you never get to work on time. So I think that requirement needs to be fed in there, and perhaps we should be thinking about how we can make that point through to Councillor Bryan.
I think that's a good idea, that is, Chair, because earlier today I attended a meeting which is called the Purbeck Local Alliance Group, which I'm obviously involved in, and obviously young people did actually come up on that meeting, and often we were saying the biggest barrier, particularly in the Purbecks, is just young people having that ability of independence, of actually moving around, because obviously public transport, you know, there is to say is a bit, I'm afraid, is a bit scarce in the Purbecks. It is, and often really the only real way of getting around is if you've got a car. And of course, as Councillor Parry said, you know, earlier, you know, passing that driving test for a young person is an incredible, you know, is an incredible achievement, and it obviously unlocks so many other doors. It does, particularly as you go into adulthood and, you know, obviously into future employment.
Yeah, and I think that for our children in care, speaking as a parent and as a grandparent, actually a grandparent of a grandson who passed his driving test this week at 17.5 years old, and I'm very proud of him. But it is a thing that parents see that as it frees up their life. They no longer are a taxi. But for a lot of our children in care, there's not the motivation from a parent to get the child into a car and away, is there? So we need to have that motivation and help in that way. But we're trying to get people out of cars, and therefore we need to make sure that our public transport is fit for purpose for those youngsters who don't live on the main bus route. Teresa, you were wanting to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'll ponder that issue about driving a bit more, because Kirsten will tell us. Well, then you'll now just be entering that, Councillor Weller. Passing the test is one thing. Buying an old car is another thing. Getting the insurance for it's the big thing. Yeah. In my experience, many thousands of pounds, and so we struggle with that. But I think we need to think as corporate parents, what can we do to kind of make that? I can see all the parents around the room who have had to have those kind of moments. I know, I remember. What I wanted to raise, though, my apologies, is Councillor Cal Jones, on page 14 of the data set, there is some information there about achievement at Key Stage 2, maths, writing, reading, and the average attainment 8 score for children in care. That gives us some information. I'm wondering if that kind of answers any of your questions that you were raising earlier, really helpful ones that they were too. Obviously, it's a bit out of date, or a lot out of date, because that's how educational data goes. And whether we need to bring something more kind of lifetime to you, but there is something there on page 14 I just wanted to draw your attention to.
Thank you for that.
I just need to take a closer. I might have been looking at something a little bit different. I was particularly drawn to the part which mentioned the children specifically with the HCP. So I'll I'll double check. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure, Carol, that if you want more information on that, Matthew would be very happy to direct you to drilling down into that.
Thank you so much.
I've just preempted you, Matthew. You were just going to say that, weren't you?
Oh, no, absolutely. And I was going to say, we also have a Virtual Schools annual report that will be coming to the board as well. So just to make you aware of that, and absolutely. So yeah, just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions before we start on the advantages or disadvantages of buying cars and insurance and all the other things? I think that the bus strategy is something that we should perhaps try to be working on, because, as I say, in terms of Councillor Bryan will tell us, we need to be out of our cars and onto buses, but he needs to make sure that we and our young people have the buses that we need to get onto, doesn't he? So let's help him with that if we can. Any other questions on the data set? No. Right, Matt, we're on the home straight.
Yes, we are. Thank you, Councillor Weller. Just to say that our next corporate parenting board is the 11th of October. It's my understanding that remains virtual unless there's any further updates in the coming weeks between now and then. So thank you. Oh, and sorry, it is an informal board as well. Apologies, I should have said that.
It's an informal board, isn't it? And that's, as Sarah Jane mentioned earlier, that's significant. We'll need to speak about how we can make that as interactive as possible, won't we, with our young care leavers?
Absolutely. There's a lot of work going on in the background with our Youth Voice team. I know Kay Wright is here on the call. We're doing a lot of work so we can present alongside our young people and make it as interactive as possible.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries.
Sarah Jane, did you want to come in at all, and any comments on that?
Thank you, Chair. Just to really encourage people to really think about the care leaver strategy. As I say, it will really form the basis of a lot of the work that we're doing, and a real opportunity for us all to challenge ourselves as to our offer and making sure that it's as good as it possibly can be. And great that our care leavers, young people, are going to be right alongside us for that, as they are the experts. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Richard Biggs. You wanted to come back in?
Yeah, it's just an issue. I don't think we touched on it really, but we've got this problem with the approving the agendas or the minutes, and I am concerned that we're going on for yet another meeting that won't be.
I'm sorry, Richard. That's entirely my fault, because I'd written myself a note and then ignored it. As you're aware, with these virtual meetings, we're not in a position to approve minutes, and had a conversation with Councillor Biggs and with Matt and others, that if we don't look at the minutes as we go through, when we finally get to meet personally, we're going to have a year's worth of minutes to read and approve. So actually your minutes were sent out to you. I hope you all received them in advance of this meeting. And if you can try to pretend that we are really at the beginning of the meeting, I'm going to ask you this question. Have you all managed to read those minutes? Is there anything in them that you query in terms of its accuracy or so on? We can't approve it now until later, but if there is something on those minutes that you don't think is accurate, that you need changed, would you like to point that out now? As I say, I'm hoping that you have all received those minutes. They were sent out. I'm not getting any responses. Is everybody happy with the minutes that they received? Can you sort of take your mics off mute for a moment and just shout yes or no, and I'll try to discern everybody's voices.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You're
Yes.
good.
Yes.
I think that the minutes of all the meetings have been sent out, but I haven't checked specifically. So I will go through that with Megan and make sure that the minutes for every meeting that we have been obliged to hold virtually have gone out to you. And then if we have any questions, perhaps we can just run through those so that when we do meet, we'll be able to just get through that procedure fairly quickly. As I say, otherwise we're going to be looking at 12 months of minutes and we won't manage to do anything else. Does that? I'm hoping that that makes sense.
I think it's the best way you can do it, Chair, at this point, really, in the way in which we're working. So yes, as you say, we'll endeavour to remind you at the beginning of any future meetings that are
No, I should have. I have it written down, Teresa. But blame it on whatever you like, incompetence probably, but it was there and it should
the
have been.
joy of seeing everybody, that's all it was. We were all having a lovely hello.
we were all enjoying ourselves, and I've got it written here clearly, so thanks very much for reminding me about that, Matt. I'm now feeling very pleased with myself because it's 7:15. And we do seem to have got through. Does anybody have any burning issue that they want to discuss before we go? Again, I'm not seeing anything. Andrew, Councillor Parry, you've got your hand up.
Madam Chairman, if I may, and I won't embarrass the new member of staff we have at Dorset Council, who is one of our care leavers, but I was delighted to see Kay Wright was mentioned earlier on. I happened to be in County Hall last week whilst Kay was giving this care leaver an induction. And what a fabulous thing. We have always talked about encouraging our care leavers to come and work for the family firm. And I got to meet somebody who was exactly that in that situation. It was a wonderful moment. And I'm sure the board would like to wish the individual all the best for the future and welcome to the firm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, that's wonderful. Kay, if it's not too embarrassing for you, can you put your camera on so that if and when we are allowed back in the building and we see you, we can say hello?
Sorry, Kay
Hello,
was
can you see me?
round, so just so you know.
Lovely, terrific. And yes, we all echo that welcome to you. That's absolutely terrific. Well done on that. That's great. Thank you, Andrew. Right. We've got two. Simon, who else have we got?
So we have also recently employed an apprentice within our joint commissioning team to support us in terms of capturing young people's voice as part of our commissioning processes. I think one of the things that we're conscious of is trying to recognise that they are employees first and their care leavers second. So I just encourage people to kind of reflect on that we are employing them, and we don't want to kind of be constantly drawing attention to their care leaver status. But equally, it is fantastic to have them on board and to have been able to support young people to be in the position to come into these roles. And likewise, I'm really pleased with it, and I think they'll really add value both to Kay's work and to some of our kind of capturing young people's voice within our commissioning work.
Excellent. Well, that's all good news, isn't it? Absolutely terrific. And we've got somebody on work experience as well. So great. So we're moving, we're actually, as it were, putting our money where our mouths are, aren't we? In that, we said we wanted to do this and we're doing it. So that's great. Terrific. Well done, everybody. And I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you all very much indeed for your input. Thank you to all the report writers. There's really good, really helpful. Teresa, sorry, did I just cut you off? Did you want to speak?
No, not at all. I was just getting ready to say thank you, Chair.
Right. Okay. Thanks very much indeed to everyone, and have a nice evening. It's still a little light.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.